The Book of Negroes by Lawrence Hill tells the story of the capture and enslavement of an African-American girl named Aminata and outlines the many events in her journey that leads to the loss of her family, home, and personal freedom. Aminata's racial background and her captivity and slavery keep her as a part of the lower class within a white-dominated society. Aminata has to endure years of suffering at the hands of the white slave owners, who continuously oppress her. Aminata suffers the consequence of alienation, which she later uses as a means to escape slavery. Overall, Aminata's journey from oppression to freedom is depicted through the capitalistic Marxist society's view of class distinction, power and oppression, and alienation. Marxist theory explains that capitalistic societies distinguish between classes as outlined in the Book of Negroes that illustrates distinction between African slaves and African slave owners. There are two classes, the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. The proletariat is a term for the class of wage earner in a capitalistic society whose only possession of significant material value is their labor power, and the bourgeoisie is a class of people who own the social means of production as their private property. In the novel, Aminata, a slave, belongs to what the Marxist terms is a proletariat, and who is a part of the working class. The only value on her life is the amount of work she can produce for the upper class. Aminata expresses the sacrifice that African slaves endure. We have given them our food, our bed, our blood, our lives. The bourgeoisie, however, are the white landowners who are managers of all the proletariat. In fact, they even dominate them. The nature of class distinction within the setting of the novel in South Carolina creates a constant conflict that is naturally developed because one group is superior while the other is oppressed. In the story of the Book of Negroes, the captured African slaves are continuously oppressed by the white powerful citizens. The need for white Americans to make even more money allows them to exploit the African slaves at a very low cost to increase their production, which is the means of a society to exploit those who are weaker and more vulnerable. Aminata and the other slaves are used to produce for the economy of those in power so that they can become wealthier, which contributes to their oppression as slaves. Throughout the exploitation of the characters, in particular Aminata, there are moments when the African slaves struggle with their role as the oppressed. Quote, "It would seem to me that the trading of men would continue for as long as some people were free to take others as their property." Throughout the exploitation of characters, in particular Aminata, there are moments when the African slaves struggle with their role as the oppressed. However, Aminata is always focused on her goal of overcoming the dominance of the white man over her. Aminata realizes that the oppression would continue unless the African achieves total and complete freedom. Individuals who continue to have economic superiority will oppress those who are more vulnerable. Aminata is relentless in her goal of achieving freedom and stops at nothing to achieve it. When individuals such as Aminata are oppressed, Marxism believes that as a result of capitalism, individuals will experience three forms of alienation. Firstly, the worker is alienated from what he or she produces. Secondly, they are alienated from themselves. And lastly, they are alienated from one another. Building the Tubob's ship, fighting the angry waters, loading all these people and goods onto the ship just to make us work for them. Surely they can gather their own mangoes and pound their own millet. Aminata is confused about the system of working and producing in North America and questions how people must work to improve the economic status of others. When workers are alienated from themselves, we see an example when Aminata is with Georgia, and Georgia is teaching Aminata how to talk to the white landowners, or the Tubob. I was never to look a bucker in the eye when he spoke to me, or to act like I knew more than him. The best approach is to follow the booker's conversation like a well-trained dog. When Aminata is in presence of her master, she pretends to be who he wants her to be, which means she can't express herself. Lastly, when the workers alienated from each other, Aminata must alienate herself from others in order to succeed. Unlike other slaves, Aminata is able to access a library, thus being more intellectually superior than the other slaves. Aminata's forced captivity into a life of oppression leads her to fight for her freedom from the capitalistic Marxist society that defines class distinction, power, and alienation that favors the upper class. She is a good role model and a sign of hope for others who are forced to live a life without their own personal freedom and control, and illustrates how determination can make anything possible.